We have thousands and thousands and thousands of phone calls. We call the Gazans on their cell phones and we say, get out of harm's way. We drop leaflets. We offer safe corridors, safe havens for people to leave. It's incomparable. He says there is one comparison. In World War II, the battle for Manila. I wasn't familiar with it. I heard it from him. He says in the battle for Manila, there were 17,000 Japanese soldiers. And the American army went in, and they found something that they haven't encountered before, systemic tunnels. They weren't called tunnels, they were called sewage tunnels. And the Japanese soldiers used the sewage tunnels, which made the fighting a lot more difficult. Manila had a population of 1 million. 100,000 civilians were killed in that battle. The Israeli army is going to lengths that no other army has done to prevent civilian casualties. No other army. Of course, this doesn't prevent the vilification of Israel. This doesn't prevent the horrible slurs and slanders and lies that are hurled against the Jewish state and the Jewish army. I mean, this is incredible. They took us to this farce in The Hague. South Africa accuses us of genocide. Can you imagine? South Africa accuses us of genocide when we're doing everything but genocide against a genocidal foe. And this is repeated, sometimes by world leaders. Today, the president of Brazil, by comparing Israel's war in Gaza against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization, to the Holocaust, President Silva has disgraced the memory of 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis, and he's demonized the Jewish state like the most virulent anti-Semite. He should be ashamed of himself. You know, we often speak about the history of anti-Semitism. And we say, how could those lies that were leveled against the Jewish people, these extraordinary falsifications, these unbelievable diatribes that had no basis in fact, how could they have been believed by so many? But that's exactly what's happening today in the case of Israel. The vilifications, diatribes, and lies leveled against Israel are believed by many, but I have to say also there are many who don't believe them and stand by us, beginning with the United States of America and the broad segments of the American public. Yes, there are some who join the demonstrations. The most absurd thing is gays for Gaza. Have you seen this? I mean, you don't want to be gay in Gaza. You can't talk about human rights and talk about the Hamas regime, this monstrous entity that executes anybody who disagrees with them. They are now, as we are making every effort to get civilians out of harm's way, Hamas is doing every effort to keep them in harm's way. And when we provide safe corridors and the Gazans begin to move there, they try to stop them at gunpoint. And when they can't stop them at gunpoint, they stop them with gunfire. To identify with Hamas and to hurl these lies at Israel is to side with the barbarians. But I want to tell you, none of this will stop us. None of this will stop us. None of it. We're committed to total victory, and total victory means the release of the hostages. This is not something that is simple. It's very hard. I'm not sure that any government has faced quite such a predicament. It has horrible dilemmas. The release of hostages is an imperative in the Jewish tradition, but it puts decision makers in very difficult situations. You know, when you're young and you're a soldier in a special unit, you don't quite understand that, because I've had my own personal experience. This has accompanied me in my life. I was wounded in the rescue of hostages from a hijacked Sabina airplane. My older brother, Yoni, died while leading the Entebbe rescue of 103 Jewish hostages. Recently, we achieved the release of 110 hostages. That's a very important number. It's not enough. We still have a way to go. But we released the majority of hostages, of living hostages, which is very, very crucial. And most recently, a few days ago, we achieved a wonderful rescue of two additional hostages, by our brave soldiers. Our formula is very simple. The release of hostages can be achieved through strong military action and tough negotiations, very tough negotiations. That tough position has to involve the exertion of pressure. And the exertion of pressure is not merely on Hamas itself, but on those who can exert pressure on Hamas, beginning with Qatar. Qatar can press Hamas as no one else can. They host Hamas leaders. Hamas is dependent on them financially. And I urge you to press Qatar, to press Hamas, because we want our hostages released. I hope that we can achieve a deal soon to release more of our hostages. But deal or no deal, we have to finish the job to get total victory. I had recently a very good conversation with President Biden. I very much appreciate the support that he and the U.S. government have been giving us since the beginning of the war. Sometimes we have differences of opinion, but we've been able to overcome them. And I want to tell you that I agree with President Biden that we need to do everything in our power to get civilians out of harm's way as we complete the job. We've destroyed 3/4 of Hamas's fighting battalions. It's very important to understand. They have organized battalions where commanders give orders to companies or to organize fighting formations, and you can have 100 people attack the Israeli army from this direction, or 50 people attack them from that direction. Once you destroy the battalions, there is no organized command and control structure. You're left with individual terrorists, which we mop up with ground action, which is much less intense. We cannot leave 1/4 of Hamas's terrorist battalions intact. No one would do that in the case of fighting ISIS. You wouldn't leave 1/4 of ISIS intact in a defined territory. You wouldn't even think about that, and you didn't. America finished the job with its allies. We will finish the job here with our brave soldiers. And we will make sure that the civilian population has a way to get out of harm's way, to safe corridors and to safe zones. I hope we can also reach an understanding on the day after Hamas. But here's the critical thing. The day after Hamas is the day after Hamas is destroyed. The emphasis is on after Hamas is removed from the scene. And I can tell you one thing that I think we can agree on many things, but one thing Israel cannot agree to is an international diktat that would seek to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state, basically force a Palestinian state on Israel after the horror of October 7th. And you should know that the people of Israel are really united in this. I brought today a resolution before the government. I want to read it to you. Israel utterly rejects international diktats regarding a permanent settlement with the Palestinians. A settlement, if it is to be reached, will come about solely through direct negotiations between the parties without preconditions. Israel will continue to oppose unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. Such a recognition in the wake of the October 7th massacre would be a massive and unprecedented reward to terrorism and would prevent any future peace agreement. This passed unanimously in the government today. It will pass tomorrow in the Knesset, I think with an overwhelming majority, and I hope that the conference can consider adopting this statement as well. This will send a message of unity. Unity inside Israel, unity outside Israel, unity between us. And I have to tell you again, you can see this when you go outside. You can see that in the taxi cabs. You can see it if you walk into a restaurant or in the lobby of a hotel where you're staying at. Israel is united as never before. The army is united as never before. The public is united as never before. And we are united, and we are united with you for one thing: total victory. Total victory will give us security. Total victory will give us peace and an expansion of the peace with our Arab neighbors. And total victory will ensure our future. Thank you, friends. Thank you, the Conference of Presidents.